welcome everyone to another episode of Diversitas, the podcast at the intersection of diversity, business, and culture. We are so happy today to have a very old friend of mine, Danne Johnson, who is a professor at Oklahoma City University. As a matter of fact, her full title is the Constance Baker Motley Professor of Law at Oklahoma City University. She is also the principal of a diversity consulting firm, Our Work LLC. And so we are very happy to have Danne Johnson today. Danne, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
I am, these podcasts are we try to have them be evergreen, which means that we can use them whenever or however we want. But, we are in very interesting times. And so I would be remiss to say that, we are going through a period of time, as you know, where our environment is in, our physical environment.
Absolutely.
And so we here in the Philadelphia region really suffered terrific damage last night from these rains. And so that's heavy on my mind. And then, which I'd like to talk to you about, this Texas decision is also incredibly problematic. I mean,
absolutely.
We're kind of hurtling towards more environmental turmoil while we turn the clock back on our rights. I don't know what to say about it, but let's talk about you. So you are, as I was going to say earlier, the Constance Baker Motley Professor of Law at Oklahoma City University.
Yes.
Tell us about your journey. Like, how did you get from, I don't want to go too far back, but let's say, how did you get from a graduate of the University of Pennsylvania to a named professor at Oklahoma City?
Absolutely. So I have to go back just a little bit further.
Sure.
I'm just a regular old girl from Detroit, Michigan. And I was raised in a place where I didn't know much about race being a factor, because when I grew up, it was 85% African American. So I grew up with a majority perspective. I thought I could do anything and be anything. And that's really how I led my life. I'm first generation college. And when I got to the University of Pennsylvania, I didn't know that it was Ivy League. It was the only school I applied to, and I applied early decision. So I had 50 applications at home, and I told my mom I was going to apply to all 50 schools, and she told me we couldn't afford that. So I didn't know what to do. The next day, an African-American woman, showed up at my high school to talk about the University of Pennsylvania. And I asked her, "Do you have an application?" And she said, "I might have one in my bag. And early decision is next week." So in 7 days, I did that application. I got accepted and never applied to another school.
That's hilarious.
It's hilarious, right? It's just the way that things have happened. I went to Penn. It was my first time really being away from home, perhaps to stay. And it was one of the first times I had been in such a diverse atmosphere. It was the first time I heard anybody shouting an N-word out the window, and those kinds of experiences. And it was shocking to me. It was just shocking. So I had some friends from Detroit, and we wanted to go home after college and open up a school for African-American boys. That's what we were going to do. But we didn't have no money. So I decided I was going to be a stockbroker. And so maybe I'll go to business school. I don't know. And then we had a dip in the market, and people were committing suicide. And so I just said, well, clearly that ain't for me. But let me pick something else. So I'm going to be a lawyer. And that's how I got to law school.
Let's back up a little bit. So I first became aware of you anyway when you were still in high school, and you were going to Carnegie Mellon Carnegie Mellon had this summer
Yeah.
program, I guess, for achieving high school students who had some interest in science, right?
Something like that.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So, what was your major in undergrad? Did you stick with the
African American
science?
studies? No. So I did what first generation. My life is full of rookie mistakes. So I got to the University of Pennsylvania. I didn't really know what it was. I knew I enjoyed math, and reading for me was difficult. So I decided to take calculus. Now, it wasn't concerning to me that I had never had pre-cal. I'm just going to take calculus. Tragic error, the first D, and I didn't get any tutors because, tutors are for dumb people. And all the rookie mistakes in the world. So I told myself that I'm going to take calculus too, because I'm just going to try a little bit harder. Honey, another D. So I abandoned the mathematical route, the scientific route, and just floundered around. Took classes that were interesting to me and ended up as an African-American studies, Afro-American studies major.
Was Elijah Anderson there at the time?
No.
Okay. Was there was there anyone that I would know who was there as a professor at the time?
Yes. One man who I can't call his name. He is Herman Beavers.
Oh, I remember him. Okay.
Professor Beavers was there. Yeah. I had a class with him. And there were some other very interesting professors. But, because I'm first generation, I didn't know what I was supposed to be doing. I didn't make deep connections. I went back to the dorm after class. I didn't visit professors after class. I didn't understand that one of the things that undergraduate education is for is to network.
Oh, yeah.
It's not just the acquisition of knowledge.
I agree with that. I didn't know
that.
Yes, I completely.
So I was trying to hang out.
So that's, what, and we don't tell our kids that enough. Although I did tell my son that. I was like, you need to get to know these professors, particularly in areas that where you're interested, because you don't know who they're, because we don't know. I mean, I'm sure your children do and my children do. But when I was growing up, I didn't know anything about networks. I didn't know anything about, I didn't know anything about that. Nothing. I don't know what I thought, but I didn't know, that wasn't it. Yeah.
So that's what I mean about rookie mistakes. So I went through Penn, and I don't have many close friends from Penn. There are a small handful of people that I'm connected to. But if I had been more intentional and more focused, I think I could have a broad, thriving network. Right. But I didn't make that happen.
So I remember another time, and so just full disclosure, Danne and I have known each other since we pups, if you haven't figured that out.
I was in 11th grade when we met.
Yes, right. Which is crazy.
Old woman now.
Yeah, I wouldn't go that far. I wouldn't go that far. But I remember us hooking up at the University of Michigan. Remember that?
Yeah.
For the Ella Baker Conference. Remember that?
Yes.
So you did have some, did you had some network in college. What was that network?
Around the Black Student Association. That was the majority of my network. And I think part of it was my desire to really find my people. So I left Detroit, where I felt very much embraced, and I went to an institution, and I didn't know many people when I entered, and I didn't have networks like other African-American students. Those other students, some of them were in Jack and Jill, and so they knew each other when they got there. But I didn't come from that background. So I felt very much alone. And so I selected a dorm that was dedicated to the exploration of African-American history and culture, the Du Bois House.
Right.
And through the Du Bois House, I've worked with Black Student Association and those things.
Right.
And then larger student government. I
Right.
was on a committee to appoint students to committees.
Okay.
And that was my own political effort to act as a check to make sure that minority students got appointed to committees university-wide.
Okay.
So that's what I
Okay.
was working on.
Interesting. So you graduate from college. You don't necessarily know what you're going to do. You think about a couple of different options, areas that you might want to explore, and then you land on law school. So
Yes.
tell me about your
Two
law
things.
school. Tell me about your law school experience.
Absolutely. Two reasons for law school, right? There was the MBA collapse, but my mother had sued the Detroit Police Department earlier. And I remember being a little girl and reading an affidavit, and it said, "And further affiant saith not." And I just thought that I had to be 8, 9 years old. I just thought that was magic language. "And further affiant saith not." I said, "Oh, I like that." It just sounded all Shakespearean or something. I loved it.
Right.
So that was what made me look toward law school. And also, Dean Robert Clayton was at Tulane. So I had a variety of different schools. And Dean Robert Clayton from Tulane called me. And he said, "I think you need to come here." And I said, "Okay." It was
Why? Why
all
did he call you?
He wanted to make sure his class had the right representation from all across the nation of
Wow.
minority students.
Wow.
And he's an African-American dean. He was very active. They had a minority clerkship program. And he called me personally, which was more outreach than any other school I was considering had done. That made a big difference to me. So I went to law school, and law school is the hardest thing ever because I had an undiagnosed reading problem.
Oh, are you serious?
My life is so crazy. So it took me everything I had to make it through law school, and I was petrified, and there were lots of work, and I didn't know what I was doing, and I didn't know any lawyers. It was horrible. I ended up transferring to GW, did my last 2 years at GW, and I've just been stepping along, trying to make good decisions ever since.
So why did you transfer to GW from Tulane?
So I wanted to be in a place where I could see myself residing and working. New Orleans is an interesting place. They have what for me was an unfamiliar social structure in terms of race and skin color. And I didn't want to learn any more about complex skin color structures. That was hard for me. I couldn't understand how different people that I viewed as African-American people were somehow better than other African-American people based on skin tone. Mm-hmm. That was something I didn't really experience in Detroit or in my family because we have a wide range. We range from passing to chocolate chip in one family. Mm-hmm. So I hadn't really had an opportunity to participate in the hierarchy of light skin is preferenced over darker skin. I hadn't had that experience, but in New Orleans, I could see that happening.
Interesting.
And that was uncomfortable for me. I also felt as though people in the dominant culture felt very free to direct, tell, and control people in minority cultures. So I said, well, this is not where I intend to live. I need to move. So I went to GW and felt happy and at home. But this is another part of my fractured story, failing to network. I come in as a 2L student, and all the friendships are made in the 1L year.
Correct. Right.
So I don't have a peer group.
It's very rare, by the way, that even happens at all. Or used to be when we were in school.
No one transfers. Right. So here I am, a brand new kid all over again. In some ways, playing catch up with the social scene, with how to apply for jobs and how to get things done. All of the things that you would learn through ritual during that first year, I missed.
And now you're an ultra competitive DC as well.
Absolutely. So alone and messing it up one more time.
Yeah. It's called trial and error. Again. It's called trial and error. That's life.
Well, I be doing it. I be trying it. Okay. So that was law school, and it was hard. It was really hard. And I didn't get diagnosed with my reading problem until I was a practicing attorney after I passed the bar in New York. I passed on the first try. And I have been compensating my entire life up until the point where I took the bar. I had only ever read 5 books in my entire life. I had always read just enough to write the essay. So in high school, if someone says, oh, we're going to read this text and we're going to write an essay, I would pick one chapter and decide my essay going to be about this one chapter. And I would read that one chapter and research it and cliff note it and all of that. And I would write a wonderful essay on one chapter. So I hadn't read any books.
That's amazing.
It was hard. One of the books I read was Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. It's a coming of age story.
That's
it's
amazing.
that kind of thing.
But that also speaks to your brilliance because, you know, we can talk about all of this stuff, but here's what I know. You're not going to be a professor unless your grades are pretty good. Like that ain't happening. That ain't happening.
I worked hard.
That ain't happening.
I worked hard.
Right? And you ain't getting a call. So let's back it up. You ain't getting, so let's back it. Back it, right? Because now I'm thinking about it. You don't apply to the University of Pennsylvania, which was still the University of Pennsylvania back then.
Yes.
And get in early decision unless you did good in school. And then you don't get a call from Tulane's dean to say, come to my school if your grades ain't good, right? And then you don't become a professor if your grades ain't good. So it speaks to your brilliance is really the point. If you are dealing with a reading challenge all throughout that, you're young, I mean, that's crazy.
It's crazy. It's crazy. So the one thing I have, the one bit of confidence, if I'm not confident about anything else, is I can outwork you, and you. I may not be able to get it quickest, but when I read it, my memory, because of all this compensating, is in the 98th percentile.
Right.
So when I read it, I got it. I got a lock on that. And now I can twist it and turn it and manipulate it, but it's the reading part. So once I get it, I got it, but I got to do the reading. Mm-hmm. And so it has really, really been difficult. It's been the kind of thing, my cross that I'm bearing. When I was in my 30s, a practicing attorney, I thought, I got all these errors in my work and I just can't seem to control it. Why is this happening? So I went to, you know when something's wrong with you. Mm-hmm. So I go to get diagnosed, and that's how I find out that I have this memory in the 98th percentile. But that my comprehension and my speed is in the 60-something percentile. And when there's a disconnect, they believe that I learned to read based on my memory, that I memorized all of the words, and that's not the appropriate cognitive process for reading. So they assigned me some kind of therapy. But now, mind you, I'm in my 30s, and this place that diagnosed me, they work with high compensating individuals, usually 15 years old. So I showed up, and it's a woman who's dressed in a purple plush velour dress, talking to me like we watching Barney together, asking me if I done did the homework and that I should do better and I should do this assignment. And I had to let her know I was a grown woman, and I don't know who she thinks she is, but I don't have to put up with this. So I went one time to reading therapy, cussed her out in a very nice way, and never went back. So it's just empowering to know that I have a disability. Oh, wow.
So you never even really tried to deal with it, address it?
No. I'm just still stuck in Struggleville. And that was in my 30s. So I made it all these years. And, I'm just.
Yeah, it is what it is.
Stuck in Struggleville. But I counsel my children to figure out what's wrong and to go and fix it. And I counsel all my students to figure out what it is and to work to fix it, that they owe it to themselves. But for me, I had accomplished the 2 degrees. I had passed the bar and I was gainfully employed. Spend a bunch of time with people who talk to 15-year-olds crazy. That wasn't on my list. It's not on my list.
So tell me,
Mm-mm.
tell me about so you graduate from law school
Yes.
and you don't go immediately, you don't become a professor immediately, you go to work. So what did you do between the time you graduated and the time you went to because Oklahoma City is the only school you've been to, right?
It is. It's the only school.
God bless
So
you.
after graduation in Washington, D.C. from GW, I went to the United States Securities and Exchange Commission, to the Office of Enforcement in New York. And I did the enforcement and prosecution of allegations about insider trading, violations of the 33 and 34 Act primarily. I took a lot of witness testimony. I brought cases. I became a supervisor there, and I was a branch chief. And I enjoyed every minute at the SEC. But something happens when you're young. When you're young, you want to know what else is out there. So I left the SEC and I went to MetLife. And at MetLife, I worked more on the 40 Act. I did mutual funds and helped to develop variable annuity products. It's for most people really, really a snooze.
For real.
Right? I know I don't want to put everybody to sleep, but it was interesting as I was working with the federal securities laws.
Right.
Then 9/11 happened in New York. My husband happened to be in the building during the attack.
Wow.
And he lived. So that made us think we have to reconsider all of life, that God has given us an opportunity to get it together and to get it right. Whatever we don't like about being here in New York, we need to figure it out. So that's what we went about doing. I decided I didn't like working where I was working, and then we had a baby, and I didn't want to go up and down the subway stairs with the little thing you push. I don't even remember what that is. I'm so lucky. The stroller. I call it lucky when you can't remember the baby words. The stroller. I didn't want to carry it up and down the subway stairs because I was going from place to place. I didn't want to live like that. So, and because I knew I didn't have to live like that. I knew about the options because I had come from another city where people did it differently. So I knew there were other options. Right. That's when I started looking to be a professor. I ended up in Oklahoma because it looks like home. Everybody has a car. Everybody has a driveway and a garage. It looks like home. It's nothing like home, but it looks like home. Mm-hmm. And that's what brought us here. We thought if it don't work out in Oklahoma, we'll keep our brownstone in New York. Mm-hmm. So we still have our place in New York, but we've been in Oklahoma 18 years now.
And you ain't going nowhere.
No, I don't think so.
So what's your so when you went to Oklahoma City, what was your academic interest?
I sold myself as having an interest in the federal securities laws and civil procedure. And I sold myself in that way because civil procedure was my favorite class. My professor at Tulane was Wendy Brown and Wendy Scott Brown. And Professor Brown is an African-American woman. And every day that I went to her class, I thought, I want to make Wendy proud.
I hear you.
So every day I felt inspired. And she has been a faculty mentor and a guide to, I believe, 6 other African-American women who have gone on to be law professors. Wow. I think that's unusual. Mm-hmm. And so we are the daughters of Wendy. Mm-hmm. And we have had occasion to meet and to have dinner, and we love her. And so that was my best class in law school. And I decided that's what I would teach. I would be somebody else's Wendy. So that's how I ended up with civil procedure and securities reg because of my background and my depth of knowledge. Right. I still teach civil procedure. I also teach nonprofit. I teach American legal history from a race perspective. Mm-hmm. And occasionally corporations or agency.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, the reason why, I wanted to have you on is, obviously you because you're you, but also because our paths have kind of ironically converged on this large topic of diversity, right?
Yes.
So tell me about what you were doing in that space and how you got to be in that space.
It's really a full circle, right? So I grew up in a place that's 85% African American. When my little girl is 6 years old here in Oklahoma, she comes to me and she says, Mom, why is it that African American people are not as beautiful as white people? And that just really knocked the wind out of me, Michael, because you don't want your baby to feel that way.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm African American, and the art in my home is African American, and my husband is African American. And I just think I give this enriched environment for her to grow in and thrive. But somehow she felt this way.
Mm-hmm.
And so she's lucky because her mama loves to talk and is quick-footed and sure-witted. I said, baby, it's about the economy. Whoever controls the economy gets to decide what beauty looks like. Mm-hmm. I said, who do you think is the most beautiful woman in Africa? And she looked at me with her big brown eyes and she goes, is it an African American woman? And right, that ain't exactly the right answer, but I said, no. Yes, right. Yes, it is, honey. And so she could hold on to that and make sense of that. And we talked about what controlling the economy means and what it means to be a minority and those things. Right. But now the same side of that coin, there is a white child somewhere who feels that she is the more beautiful child, mm-hmm. that she is more beautiful than African American children. Mm-hmm. And in her home, no one is saying, honey, I just want to tell you, you are no more beautiful than an African American child. Right. So that's the flip side of the coin, right? This microaggression or this injury or this thing that society is saying, you are not as beautiful. The other side of that coin is someone else is feeling affirmed and confident. They are feeling powerful. And the truth is, neither side, neither one of those children has done anything noteworthy. Right. But one child feels not as good and the other child feels esteemed. Right. It's that kind of thing that made me think I need to do something to help make the world better, because I want my daughter to know that the whole world is for her. Mm-hmm. I want her to be able to exercise her self-determination. And I want something that we're not willing to talk about usually in polite circles. I want her to be free. We don't talk about it like that no more because we think we free. But what we really possess, and I'll just speak for me as an African American woman, I have circumscribed freedom. As long as I stay within this box, what someone has determined for me, everything works out. But I don't have the full freedom that could possibly be available. And I want her to have the full freedom.
So yeah, the concept of freedom is an interesting one, because if we haven't, those of us who are paying attention, if we don't know by now, the fact is that we are not free in many respects. I mean, we have the ability to vote, and, we can go get a job and we can have a mortgage and all that kind of stuff. But our society is broken in many respects. And, one thing that hasn't changed over 300 years of history is that when our society is broken, we as African-American people or people of African-American descent are generally going to get the brunt of the brokenness, right?
Absolutely.
And so, with your organization, Our Work LLC, what are you trying to do with it to help repair what you can repair of our broken society, where you are and where you want to be?
So I am talking with individuals and doing coaching, working with individuals. We work with organizations. We are working on institutional change, which takes diversity, inclusion, culture, and anti-racist practices into consideration. So I am trying to work with people to think about, even though I have great intentions, I'm a great person, I think culture and diversity, it's interesting. And I recognize humanity. To go from that to figuring out, how do I create inclusion and belonging? How is it that my good intentions are failing me? That's what I want to shine light on. How is it that even though I'm an African American woman, I can embrace white supremacy culture and
Mm.
use it against other people who are different? How do I, without really thinking about it, reinforce those norms and standards? So I really want all of us to think about these concepts as a way really to listen to one another. Too often we are doing things, we are following this wisdom of don't ask too many questions because you make people uncomfortable. We're going along with that. And I would suggest that's the wrong approach. It stops us from learning about different people. It allows us to be fearful of one another. And that's not what we want. So we need to figure out how to be more curious, how to ask more questions. In that way, we can consider what some answers might be. We could work together to create a path forward. But if I can't ask questions because I'm afraid to make people uncomfortable, we're not going to get a path forward.
Because you can't have honesty.
We
right?
can't have honesty. We can't have trust.
Yeah.
I can't understand what you really need.
Right.
Because the truth is, I'm not asking.
Right. Well, it's interesting. You know, I try to, in a lot of these presentations, I talk a lot about empathy, and it really goes back to the kind of the golden rule, right? Which, you know, is, you know, we're in the United States. The United States, you know, professes to, many in the United States, I should say, profess to be Christians, and but they kind of miss out on like the main teachings that Christ was trying to put out there, right? And so, you know, fundamentally, if I can't look at you and try to understand your perspective and try to kind of walk in your shoes, then, you know, we all kind of suffer as a result, right?
Absolutely.
So it's interesting though, Danne, because, you know, I wrote down in my little pad there, like full circle. And like you, I believe that this is full circle for me as well. You know, I started off doing big law, and then I had my own practice where I had, you know, people working for me or whatever, and you know, servicing clients and trying to be the biggest, et cetera, et cetera. And you know, at the end of the day, I was like, what do I really care about?
Absolutely.
What do I really care about? And in my kind of heart, I'm still that 20-year-old kid, 21-year-old kid, or however old I was, who was, you know, taking over the campus and, you know, all of the stuff that we used to do in our generation.
Yes.
You know, kind of immediately post-Reagan generation. But I still have the same cares and concerns, right? I don't see that our country in this culture has moved forward in a way that, you know, where my kids have it better than I did. Like, I don't believe that. Like,
right. Same with me.
Our kids don't have it better than we have.
They have it different.
Yeah.
They have it different. Yeah. And I had it different than my parents and my grandparents.
Right.
But the word better, I'm not sure. And you did this thing, Michael, where you kind of said this thing in here. Right. I talk about this all the time.
Yeah.
As the lawyers, particularly, we have to protect this thing in here. And we are called to do things that are not quite right all of the time. And we need to really guard this thing in here.
Yes.
Right? if we don't guard this thing in here, that's why lawyers, I think, are disproportionately drinking, using drugs, making bad decisions, engaged in domestic violence, because I think we're so conflicted about the things we witness and the things we're called upon to do, which don't honor this thing in here.
Correct.
So, that's a huge thing. And no one talks about that. But it's this thing in here that really should propel us forward. There is this, I'll just keep talking, Michael. There is this thing, this comedy skit that Bill Cosby does from 1971. And it is Bill Cosby on prejudice. And he is talking about all of these different racial and ethnic groups. And he uses every slur you ever heard of. And I asked my students in 2021, had you heard those words before? And they have. Mm-hmm. Do you know those words? And they have. Mm-hmm. Have things changed? And they haven't. Mm-hmm. 50 whole years. Mm-hmm. And those words are as meaningful in 1971 as they are today in 2021. Mm-hmm. So we really are not, we've been at this exact same inflection point before. What we are experiencing in terms of race and society is very cyclical. And when we emerge from it, we forget where we just came from.
So do you think that's an interesting point, because, our major in history and undergrad and, whatever. I mean, I've done enough studying of this stuff. But I don't know, Danne, this seems, where we are right now seems different in the sense that there has been a return to an acceptance of outright racist behavior that has more prevalence today. Now, you and I both know racism never went anywhere.
Right. It looked different.
It never went anywhere. But I think that, particularly me as a child of the Northeast, with some exception, you didn't see it in polite society. Okay, you didn't see it in polite society. But and I will tell you, like my first couple of jobs in the law, I worked for a law firm where I was the only Black person. Like, not even the male folks were Black. Like, everybody was white. And that was a trip. That was a head trip. And then I got into the city and did big law, and now the male people were Black, but everybody else was still not Black.
Yeah.
But in those environments, by and large, there was never any kind of eruptions like you see now. Like this stuff that we see, like, with the Karens and all this kind of stuff, these are people like who, all these people are educated. And I'm just in a state of shock as to how we got here. And then it also makes me think about what I'm doing as a quote unquote diversity professional to help move the bar from that to, and it is.
But now, Michael, there's a thing that happens to us. And I think for many minorities, this is survival technique. We forget the past because it is the way to move forward.
Yes.
You cannot keep all those hard lessons in your heart and still be a good daddy. It don't happen. As we talked, I shared with you the first time I heard somebody scream an N-word was at the University of Pennsylvania. Screaming out the window, niggas go home. That was an educated place. Ivy League students screaming those words out the window to other Ivy League students. So It has always been in polite society. We just might not have been able to see it. Right. We haven't had the ability to look into what is going on in polite society. We thought somehow when we saw something, we were in polite society. You was in mixed company. Polite society was someplace else.
Right.
And when you were the subject, the topic of the conversation, we don't really know what was going on.
Oh, yeah. So, I mean,
no,
there's no question. I mean, like we were, I mean, I don't want you to be confused about my experience was your experience, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Carnegie Mellon, I mean, I was in Pittsburgh, for God's sake. You can imagine, no disrespect to anyone who was watching from Pittsburgh, but Pittsburgh is a very interesting place around race.
Absolutely.
So I don't want to make light of that. I guess what I'm saying though is that you would think that, if when my son went to a college campus, he wouldn't have to be confronted with the N-word. When my son graduated from college, there would be, he'd still have to make his mark using his intellect and his hard work and all this kind of stuff. But that's it. Like,
yes.
these other considerations should not be considerations.
But aren't those the dreams of our parents?
Yeah. But you and I, and I don't know what your parents did, but I will tell you what my parents did. My parents were both civil servants. My mother is a high school graduate. The man who raised me, who is not my biological father, but who raised me and is my father, didn't get a college degree until after I graduated from law school. So in many respects, what's that saying? If we are our ancestors' wildest
dreams.
Right. So, my brother and I did what my parents wanted us to do, to be considered successes in our society, right? But still in all, when I look at, for example, the legal landscape for a minute, let's look at the legal landscape for a minute.
Yep.
And let's just look at it in Philadelphia. I know you're in Oklahoma City, but let's look at it in Philadelphia.
Mm-hmm.
Largest Black firm in Philadelphia has maybe 10 lawyers, maybe 10 lawyers. Like we are way behind. And as a matter of fact, we are, when you're from Detroit, so you had the preeminent Black firm in the country in Detroit, because your mayor at the time, Coleman Young, said, I'm going to make this happen.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And now we're in a different environment where I don't know whether you have champions like that now. So if you don't have champions like that, then where are the opportunities going to come from for people who are more entrepreneurial and don't want to work in corporate America? I don't want to work in corporate America.
Right.
I want to start my own. I want to do, like, where are the opportunities for them? Right.
Yeah.
So that's how I feel like we haven't kind of carried the ball forward as much as we probably should have or could have.
It's so difficult. It's so difficult because while you and I think we possess this knowledge about and confidence about our abilities and about the abilities of people who look like us. There are many people who look like us, when given an opportunity to choose who will represent them, will choose someone who doesn't look like us.
We like
and
to
they
say,
will have a whole list of reasons.
We like to say they still believe their ice is colder.
Absolutely. Right? Absolutely. Right. Their grass is greener.
Yes.
All of that.
Right.
right? So this is really one of the things that happens when you live in a white supremacy culture.
Yes.
Everyone is indoctrinated into that belief
Yes.
system.
Everyone.
Everyone.
Yes.
No one escapes
Yes.
the indoctrination.
Right.
So it's hard to carry the ball forward when you are with an entire society that's indoctrinated to say, you're probably not as capable, sir.
I like to say when I'm talking to or when I talk to a lot of people, that Black intellectual property is a hard sell
Absolutely.
in our capitalist society. It's just
Absolutely.
it's a hard sell.
It's a
Right?
hard sell.
It's a
It's
hard
a
sell.
hard sell. It's a hard sell. And, never do I, when I do this work, when I talk about diversity, inclusion, and culture, I believe it is easier for people to receive that information from me because of my presentation, because I'm in the embodiment of all of what I'm talking about, versus somebody who has darker skin. I am careful to keep that in mind, that as I create pathways, I need to create pathways for people who are doing this same work and who have darker skin, who are not given the entree that I might be given because I'm 38% European, according to Ancestry.com.
Oh, you
right?
did it?
So I did it. I did it. Because they already got all your information anyway.
So you 60-40.
Exactly. Not quite. Okay. So I know my Irish people. It's a thing.
Right.
And I think I benefit. I think that look makes it easier, makes it less
more
threatening.
palatable.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So as I walk this walk and talk about culture, I'm careful to keep that in mind. The people I partner with, the people I work with, if I'm able to benefit, I want to share that benefit, and I want to share it with people who have darker skin than me, because they are entitled to all the same things that I can get. So it's that kind of awareness that I think we need to encourage people to have.
So tell me about the environment. We're coming up against the end. I appreciate your time today. I really do. Given all that you have going on, I really appreciate your time. Tell me about, because I don't know anything about Oklahoma City. So what is it like to be an African-American professor in Oklahoma City in 2021?
The same way it would have been in 1964. It's a challenging place. We are the reddest red state in the nation. We take great pride in that. And at every turn, we seek to signal to everyone that we are the reddest red state in America. We will take up legal causes and legal challenges that are destined to fail according to the law, and we will fight them in court as far as we can, because we are signaling. It is not really about winning as much as it is about branding. For some time we have 3 major universities. For some time, I am the only African-American law professor in the state of Oklahoma.
Is that right?
And there are 3 law schools. That happens periodically where I'm the only one. On my campus this year, we were fortunate to hire a second African-American law professor. We are the only 2 African-American faculty members on the campus with tenure. That for me feels very much like 1960s. Right? And so when I think about the measurement of progress, I look at places like dance school, the English department, the history department, and I wonder, how is it that we don't have diversity? So we're a place that signals. We are the center of the belt buckle for the Bible Belt. Very conservative, very concerned with family values, ranked 48 in education acquisition, ranked 48 in health and wellness, ranked. I don't know, we could go on with those kind of rankings, from the school system to social services to our ability to keep families together. We incarcerate more women than any other place in the world. This is a place of a lot of contradictions. And interesting. So when I first got here, I would say, God, is this where you want? Hello, Jesus, have you forgotten me? Is this where you want me to be? And then something would happen. I would meet a transgender student who felt like if anybody could understand their plight, it would be me.
Right.
And they would come to me and talk to me, and we would work situations out. I would meet a white student, a woman who's raising 2 kids on her own, who felt like she didn't have anybody else to talk to or to mentor her, and she would come to me. Rural white men who need assistance would come to me. So I have mentored a whole bunch of students along the way because I offer difference. I offer different perspective. And sometimes they just look at me and cross their fingers and hope I can get it. So I'm the advisor for the Black Law Student Association, the Hispanic Law Student Association, and everybody else, right? People need help and people want outside perspectives. So I'm here for that reason, and it's
You're a beacon of
confirmed
light.
frequently. I think so, but you know, they be wearing me out, honey.
You know what? I got to tell you, I thank God for you being there, but I don't envy you. I got to tell you, I don't envy you.
It is not easy.
No.
It's not easy.
No.
And people recognize that we're not from here, servers in restaurants, because my mother has moved here. So they will come up to us in a restaurant and say, hey, where are you guys from? And I'm always thinking, why you don't think I'm from here? And my mother would say, because it's the Black family love. They ain't never seen this love before.
How many Black people are there?
A bunch, but a whole bunch of them are incarcerated. So when I say a bunch, and you know, that ain't a joke, Michael. When I say a bunch, I believe we are hitting in the 12%.
Okay.
Right? And then if you think about indigenous people, we have a large number of indigenous people here. When you think of Hispanic people, Latino, Latinx, Latina, we have a bunch of people from that area. But when you look at power structures, we have many firms with 0 minority partners, right? We have many boards, many governing organizations with 0 minorities. You know.
Well, look, I think that you're doing, quite honestly, you're doing God's work.
Whew.
And so I just, I appreciate you. And I thank you for coming on our little podcast today. We really appreciate your presence. And we are looking to work together down the road sometime soon.
Absolutely. Michael, thank you so much for having me on. And I appreciate the work that you're doing and the podcast. And I'm looking forward to our future.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And to our audience, we really appreciate you watching, and we are looking forward to having the conversation and keeping it going. Thank you and take care.